Okay, I want you to do something for me. If you're not driving, just close your eyes for a second.
Don't do it on the treadmill either.
Right, good point. But if you're safe, just picture it. I want you to go back in time. It's maybe 2014. You pick up your phone, you open up Instagram, you start scrolling. What do you see?
Oh, wow. 2014, that's a throwback. Probably a lot of really heavily filtered photos of food, right?
Yeah.
Some sunsets. And then you'd scroll past a brunch photo and then boom, there he was.
There he was, always. The beard, the giant
The
sunglasses,
stacks of poker chips that look like skyscrapers.
and the private jets, the ones that looked more like, I don't know, a billionaire's living room than an airplane. And of course, the women.
So many women. Usually on a yacht or draped over some kind of military-grade vehicle.
And all of them wearing, like, less fabric than you'd find in a single sock. You couldn't escape him. He was the king of Instagram.
He really was. It was an archetype. Dan Bilzerian. He
Yeah.
basically created a new category of internet fame before we even really knew what to call it.
Exactly. For, I don't know, a good 5, maybe 6 years, he was the guy that every kid in a college dorm room either wanted to be or, wanted to prove was a total fraud.
It's one or the other.
He sold this explosive, completely unapologetic action movie life. Guns, girls, high-stakes gambling. It was like he was playing Grand Theft Auto, but with the infinite money cheat code turned on.
It was a really fascinating cultural moment.
Yeah.
Because this was just before the word influencer became like a legitimate job title you'd put on LinkedIn.
Right.
Felt a little more raw back then, a little more dangerous maybe.
Yeah.
He wasn't trying to sell you a promo code for a smoothie.
Yeah.
Not at first, anyway. He was selling a fantasy.
A fantasy of just total unchecked masculinity and bottomless resources.
Exactly.
But here's the thing, and this is really why we're doing this deep dive today. If you haven't really checked in on the Dan Bilzerian story since those, let's call them the glory days of 2015, 2016, you are in for an absolute shock.
That's putting it mildly.
Because that whole party boy persona, that brand, it hasn't just faded away, it's collapsed. Or maybe mutated is the better word. It's become something much, much darker.
Mutation is the perfect word for it. And that's why we're here. We're not just here to gossip about some internet celebrity. We're going to look behind the curtain. We're going to look at the machinery that built the myth.
We're going to follow the money.
We have to. We're going to look at where he said the money came from, the poker winnings. And then we're going to look at where federal investigators and court documents suggest it really came from.
And we're going to dissect a business empire that, from the outside, looked like its main product was just setting piles of cash on fire.
A very, very expensive bonfire.
And we absolutely have to talk about where he is now. Right now in 2024, heading into 2025. Because the guy who positioned himself as this, fun-loving libertarian playboy has taken such a hard pivot.
A hard pivot into, into some very dark corners of the internet. We're talking about a full-blown descent into conspiracy theories, hardcore political extremism.
And rhetoric that has just completely alienated even his most loyal followers. It's genuinely shocking.
It's a case study, really. A case study in radicalization. How does someone go from being the literal poster boy for hedonism to being a mouthpiece for some truly vile hate speech? It's a wild trajectory.
So that's our mission for this deep dive, to try and separate the man from the myth. We've got a mountain of documents here, SEC filings, lawsuit transcripts, interviews, financial reports. We're going to try and answer the big questions.
Did he really win all that money?
Was his company Ignite a real business, or was it just a personal piggy bank?
And the big one. Why is he now on podcasts denying the Holocaust?
Yeah, it's a lot to get through.
A whole lot to unpack.
So let's start where all good stories start, at the beginning. The origin story. Because the tale that Dan himself has always told, the legend of Dan, is that he is the ultimate self-made man.
Right. The narrative is that he walked into the jungle with nothing but a knife, wrestled a bear, and came out wearing its skin. The ultimate alpha.
That's the brand, 100%. The idea that he's just built differently. He operates on a plane of risk and reward that us normal people can't even comprehend.
But if you actually pull back the curtain on his biography, the story doesn't really begin in some smoky, high-stakes poker room in Vegas.
No. It starts in Tampa, Florida, 1980.
And it starts with a trust fund.
Ah, the trust fund. The kryptonite for any self-made man story.
It really is. And you simply cannot understand Dan Bilzerian, the brand or the man, without first understanding his father, Paul Bilzerian.
Now, he is a character in his own right.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Paul, back in the 1980s, he was a big name on Wall Street. He was what they called a corporate raider.
Okay, I've definitely heard that term, usually in movies from that era. Someone's shouting it into a giant phone. But what does a corporate raider actually do? It sounds like a pirate with a better suit.
Honestly, that's not a bad way to think about it. It's a pretty good analogy. So a raider would identify a public company that they think is undervalued. Maybe it has a lot of physical assets, like real estate,
Yeah.
but the management is terrible. Or maybe it's just sitting on a huge pile of cash and not doing anything with it. The raider then starts quietly buying up a ton of that company's stock,
Enough to become a problem.
enough to threaten a hostile takeover.
Right.
They basically bully their way to the table. From there, they have a few options. They can force the company's board to buy their shares back from them at a huge premium just to get them to go away.
What's that called?
That's called green mail.
Green mail. Got it.
Or, if that doesn't work, they follow through on the takeover. They buy the company, fire the management, and then they strip it for parts. They sell off all the valuable asset piece by piece
Yeah.
and pocket the cash.
So it's super aggressive, probably terrible for the company's employees.
Oh, devastating for the employees. But for the raider, it could be incredibly, incredibly lucrative.
And Paul Bilzerian was one of the big names in this game.
He was very successful at it for a while until the government caught up with him. Paul ran into serious trouble with the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission.
What happened?
He ended up being convicted on multiple counts of securities fraud, conspiracy, making false statements.
Ew.
Big, messy case. But, and this is the absolute key to understanding Dan's story, before the whole house of cards came down, Paul did something very smart.
What was that?
He set up a very complex, very sophisticated web of trusts and offshore accounts.
For his kids?
For the whole family,
Crazy.
but yes, specifically for his sons, Dan and his brother Adam. And our sources are crystal clear on this. Paul Bilzerian established significant trust funds for both of them.
And we're not talking about a little college fund here.
No, we are talking about millions and millions of dollars, structured in a way that was specifically designed to be untouchable, to be out of the reach of the U.S. government and any creditors who were trying to collect on the massive judgments against Paul.
So when Dan Bilzerian is in his early 20s and he drops out of the University of Florida, where he was studying business and criminology, which is just perfect.
The irony is almost too much, isn't it?
He wasn't some broke college kid with a dream.
Not even close. He had a financial safety net woven from titanium.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to understand how that changes the entire equation of his life.
Right.
If you know that you have a multi-million-dollar backstop that can never be taken away from you, you can take risks that would seem completely insane to a normal person.
You can sit down at a poker table and drop $100,000 on a single hand.
Because if you lose, who cares?
Yeah.
You're not going to be homeless. You're not worried about rent. You're waiting for the next wire transfer from the trust.
But that completely contradicts his entire narrative. His story has always been, I never touched my father's money. I built my fortune from scratch playing poker.
That is the foundational myth. That is the hill he has chosen to die on. The poker narrative.
And the numbers he claims are they're astronomical. I was looking back at some of the articles from his peak fame around 2013, 2014.
Yep.
He claimed to have won $10.8 million in one night. A single session of poker.
That was the big one in November 2013. That was the claim that really put him on the map. And then he followed up by claiming he won a total of $50 million over the course of the next year, 2014.
$50 million. I mean, you have to put that in context. That's top-tier professional athlete money. That's superstar CEO money.
It's GDP of a small country money.
And he's claiming he made it playing cards. Now, his explanation was always, I don't play against the pros, I play against whales.
Right. His whole thing was that he seeks out these private high-stakes games with super rich businessmen who are, frankly, terrible at poker but have money to burn and want the thrill of playing for huge stakes.
Which, I mean, on its face, that sounds plausible. Those kinds of games do exist.
They absolutely exist. It's a whole underground economy. But the numbers, 50 million in a year. That's where you have to apply a serious reality check.
So how do we check that? What are the actual verifiable records of his poker career?
Well, there's a database called the Hendon Mob. It's basically the Bible of poker. It tracks the results of every major live poker tournament in the world for every player.
And what does Dan Bilzerian's profile look like on there? Is it $50 million?
It is not $50 million, not even close. His single biggest accomplishment, his crowning achievement in the world of professional tournament poker, came back in 2008.
Okay.
He played in the World Series of Poker main event. It's the biggest, most prestigious tournament on the planet. Thousands of people play.
And how did he do? Did he win it?
He did not.
Yeah.
He didn't even make final table. He finished in 180th place.
180th.
180.
Yes.
He won about $36,000 for that finish.
Look, I mean, finishing 180th out of thousands of players is not nothing. You have to be a decent player to do that.
Oh, for sure. He's not a bad player. He clearly knows the game. But there's a Grand Canyon-sized gap between being a capable amateur who got lucky and made one deep run in a tournament and being a poker god who can consistently extract $50 million a year from the game.
It's like saying, I was the star quarterback on my high school team, so it's totally believable that I'm secretly making $50 million a year, beating NFL players in pickup games in my backyard.
It's the exact same logic. The math just doesn't work. But there's one particular legal case that shines a really bright light on where some of these supposed winnings might have actually come from.
Okay.
And to understand it, we need to talk about a man named Bradley Witterman.
Okay, I saw this name in the research, and it's a wild story. He was the Ponzi scheme guy, right? How on earth does a Ponzi scheme connect to a secret Hollywood poker game?
It's one of the craziest side stories in this whole saga. So, Bradley Witterman presented himself as a successful hedge fund manager in Beverly Hills.
Or he wasn't.
He was not. In reality, he was running a classic Ponzi scheme. He was taking in money from investors, promising them these huge guaranteed returns, and instead of investing the money, he was just spending it.
The old Bernie Madoff special.
Exactly. But Ruderman had a particular weakness. He was addicted to high-stakes poker. He was desperate to be seen as a big shot, to rub elbows with celebrities, and maybe in his own mind, he thought he could win back all the money he'd stolen.
So he gets himself into these super exclusive, underground Hollywood poker games.
Very same games that were famous for having players like Tobey Maguire, Ben Affleck, Leonardo DiCaprio, and yes, Dan Bilzerian.
So Ritterman is at the poker table betting with money he stole from his investors.
Precisely. He is literally betting with people's retirement savings. And he was losing. He was losing millions and millions of dollars in these games.
Yeah.
And a significant chunk of that stolen money ended up in Dan Bilzerian's pockets.
Wow. So, okay, Dan wins the money fair and square at the table. Ritterman eventually gets caught and goes to jail. Is that the end of it?
Not by a long shot. Once the Ponzi scheme collapsed, a trustee was appointed to try and claw back as much money as possible for the victims.
Right.
The trustee's job is to trace where all the stolen money went.
Right.
And they see these huge payments, millions of dollars, going to Dan Bilzerian and the other players in the game. So they sued them.
Wait, they sued the winners. On what grounds could they do that?
It's a fascinating legal argument. They argued that because these high-stakes private poker games were technically illegal under California law, because the host was taking a rake, or a percentage of the pot, without a gaming license, that any transfer of money within that game was legally void.
So the argument is essentially, you didn't win that money in a legitimate enterprise. You were the recipient of a fraudulent transfer of stolen property.
That is exactly the argument. They weren't just winnings, they were stolen goods.
And what happened?
Dan eventually settled the lawsuit. He paid back a portion of the money. But the case is so revealing because it just pulls the curtain back on this whole myth.
It shows that his winnings weren't just the result of him being a poker genius.
Right. It was this murky, unregulated ecosystem where millions of dollars of questionable origin were flying around with zero oversight. And if you're Dan and you're sitting on a huge pile of trust fund money and you're moving it through these games, it becomes impossible for an outsider to tell which dollar is a poker win and which dollar is just dad's money being cycled through.
That's the part that really gets me. It's the opacity of it all. It's the perfect cover story for having a ton of unexplained cash.
It's the ultimate narrative for wealth that doesn't want to be traced. If you say you made your money in the stock market, I can ask to see the trade confirmations. If you made it in real estate, I can look up the deeds.
But if you say you won it all in private poker games...
There's no paper trail. There are no receipts. You just have to take their word for it. It's the perfect way to explain away the trust fund.
And it's clear he wanted to be seen as more than just a gambler. He wanted legitimacy. Which brings us to the next chapter of the myth, the businessman.
Ah, yes. Ignite International Brands Ltd. This was Dan's attempt to go corporate.
And what a glorious, spectacular flameout this was. I remember when this launched, That goat skull logo was suddenly everywhere.
It
What
was.
were they even selling? It felt like they sold everything.
They were trying to be a lifestyle brand. So they had CBD oils, they had electronic cigarettes and vapes, they had vodka, bottled water, T-shirts.
A whole gamut.
The idea was to monetize the Bilzerian lifestyle. You can't actually be Dan, but for $19.99, you can drink his vodka or wear his hat.
And they took this company public, like on a real stock exchange.
They did. In January 2019, Ignite listed on the Canadian Securities Exchange. The ticker symbol was BILZF.
So finally, we get some actual receipts. Now we have public financial statements, quarterly reports. We can finally see under the hood. How did the king of Instagram do as a public company CEO?
It was an absolute catastrophe.
Yeah.
The financial performance is genuinely breathtaking in how bad it is. In its first year as a public company, 2019, Ignite reported a loss of over $50 million.
Hold on, say that again. They lost $50 million.
In a single year.
Selling water bottles and vape pens. How is that physically possible? Did they build their headquarters out of solid gold?
That's not far from the truth, actually.
Oh.
See, the money wasn't lost because of, high manufacturing costs. The financial statements show that the vast majority of the spending was on marketing and promotion.
Okay.
But when you start to dig into the court filings and whistleblower lawsuits that came later, that marketing budget starts to look a whole lot like Dan Bilzerian's personal expense account.
And this is where the former company president, Curtis Heffernan, comes in.
Exactly. Curtis Heffernan was hired to be the adult in the room to actually run the company. And in July of 2020, he filed a wrongful termination lawsuit against Ignite.
And what was his claim? Why was he fired?
According to Heffernan's lawsuit, he was fired because he kept trying to stop Dan from, in his words, misappropriating company funds. He claimed Dan was treating the public company's bank account like it was his own personal ATM.
What kind of expenses are we talking about here?
The lawsuit listed some truly unbelievable items. A $75,000 photo shoot set, a $40,000 bed frame,
A $40,000 bed frame.
a $15,000 ping pong table, an $88,000 vault, a rock climbing wall. The list goes on and on.
Who needs an $88,000 vault for a CBD company?
The lawsuit alleged that these weren't even for the office. They were for his personal mansions in Los Angeles. Ignite was paying the massive rent on these houses, claiming they were marketing venues.
So the justification was, my life is the marketing, therefore everything in my life is a legitimate business expense.
That was the argument. My parties, my jets, my yachts, the models I fly around the world, that's all just marketing for the brand.
That is a bold strategy.
It's also, according to Heffernan, a guaranteed way to bankrupt the company. You cannot burn through $50 million in a year on parties and private jets and expect to ever turn a profit selling $20 T-shirts. The math is impossible.
So the public shareholders who bought stock in this company were essentially just paying for his Instagram content.
They were subsidizing the lifestyle. And this is where the story gets even stranger, because the shadow of his father looms large over Ignite.
Paul Bilzerian is back in the picture.
Big time. U.S. prosecutors have actually alleged that Paul Bilzerian, who, remember, is banned for life from the securities industry,
Right.
that he retained de facto control over the company. The feds claimed he was attending board meetings, directing corporate strategy, and helping to structure deals, all from behind the scenes.
So the allegation is that Ignite wasn't just a failed lifestyle brand. It was potentially a front, a vehicle for the father to get back into the corporate world and for the son to live like a king on other people's money.
That is the picture that the lawsuits and federal investigations paint.
And what was Dan's defense when all this came out?
Oh, was it?
His defense was basically that he wasn't really involved in running the company at all. He said he just showed up for the photo shoots and didn't know anything about the finances. I'm just the face of the brand. Don't ask me about the $50 million loss.
Which is just so ironic because the entire brand is built on the idea that he's the ultimate boss, the one in charge.
So what happened to the company?
Eventually, in 2022, they took it private again.
Why would they do that?
Well, when a company is public, it's subject to intense scrutiny. You have to file quarterly reports. You have to open your books to the world. And the world was seeing these massive losses.
So by going private.
The curtain comes down. No more public filings. No more having to explain the $40,000 bed frame to angry shareholders. The problem just goes away.
It's a clear pattern. He craves the attention and the glory, but he refuses any of the accountability that comes with it.
Oh.
And that mentality, it leads us right into the really dark part of his story.
Yeah.
Because if this is how he treats money and business, just wait until you see how he treats other human beings.
This is where things stop being about funny internet money and corporate shenanigans, and they start getting genuinely dangerous. We have to talk about the violence.
We do. And just a content warning for our listeners, some of the stuff in this next section is pretty disturbing. We're talking about incidents of physical assault.
And we should probably start with the violence he inflicted on himself. I mean, it's a crucial part of the story. Before he even turned 32 years old, Dan Bilzerian had already suffered 2 heart attacks.
2. Before 32. How?
By his own admission, it was from a combination of extreme drug abuse and exhaustion. He talked about binging on cocaine, Viagra, and not sleeping for days on end to keep the party going. He was literally killing himself to maintain this image.
But he survived, and it seems like after that, he started projecting that same chaos and violence outward onto other people. The incident that always stands out to me is the one with Janice Griffith, the roof toss.
Yes, April of 2014, which was just a banner year for terrible decisions for him.
So set the scene for us. What happened?
He was at one of his mansions in the Hollywood Hills doing a photo shoot for Hustler magazine. Janice Griffith, who was a pornographic actress, I believe she was only 18 or 19 years old at the time. The concept for one of the photos was, well, it was peak Bilzerian. He was going to pick her up while she was topless and throw her from the roof of the house into the swimming pool down below.
Just casually throw a person off a building for a picture.
That was the plan. Now, just think about the physics of that for a second. You're trusting a guy who is famous for his nonstop partying to execute a perfect life or death throw.
What could possibly go wrong?
He completely botched it. He underthrew her. She didn't clear the concrete deck surrounding the pool.
Oh, no.
She smashed her foot on the edge of the pool on the way down. It was a severe break. And honestly, she was lucky. She could have hit her head. She could have been killed or paralyzed.
And what was his reaction? Was he apologetic? Did he immediately offer to pay for all her medical bills?
She asked him for $85,000 to cover her medical costs and the work she would lose while recovering. And he flat out refused.
This is the guy who claimed to make $50 million that year. 85 grand is like a rounding error to him.
It wasn't about the money. It was about the principle of it. For him, he refused to accept any responsibility. So she sued him. And this is where the story gets even more disgusting.
How?
The lawyer for Hustler magazine, who was defending the photo shoot, actually argued in a legal letter that the incident was an act of God.
An act of God.
Like,
Or hurricane.
or an earthquake.
Yes. The official legal position was that Dan Bilzerian throwing a woman off a roof and failing is an unforeseeable, uncontrollable force of nature, like a lightning strike.
That is one of the most cynical, dehumanizing legal arguments I have ever heard in my life.
It's unbelievable. It basically frames her as a prop, a thing. And if the prop breaks during the photo shoot, well, that's just bad luck. It's not the fault of the person who threw it.
It tells you everything you need to know about how the women in his world were viewed as accessories. And accessories don't get a say.
And this wasn't a one-off. It wasn't an isolated incident. That very same year, he was banned for life from a nightclub in Miami.
For what?
For kicking a woman in the face?
My God. This was the Vanessa Castano incident. There was a big brawl on the dance floor. Dan's story was that he was just trying to be a hero and break up the fight to protect a friend.
But that's not what the witnesses said.
No. The victim, Vanessa Castano, and other witnesses claimed that during the chaos, he shoved her. And when she was on the ground, he kicked her in the face. There was even video footage. She sued him for $1 million.
So we have a clear pattern here. Violence happens, he claims he was either the victim or the hero, and then the lawyers come in to write checks and make it all go away.
But the escalation continued. He went from fists and feet to something much more dangerous. He was eventually arrested for, and this sounds like a joke, for building bombs.
People forget about this one, but it's maybe the most insane story of them all. In December 2014, federal agents arrested him at Los Angeles International Airport. They pulled him right off a plane.
And the warrant wasn't for some minor charge.
No. The warrant from Nevada was for possessing and manufacturing an explosive or incendiary device.
We're not talking about, like, M80s on the 4th of July. This was serious. He and a friend had taken a semi-truck cab out to federal land in the Nevada desert.
And what do they have with them?
They had a cooler packed with a mixture of tannerite, ammonium nitrate, and aluminum powder. This is a powerful explosive mixture.
Ammonium nitrate is? That's the same stuff used in the Oklahoma City bombing. That's not a toy.
Not at all. It's highly unstable. They packed it into the truck cab and blew it up. For fun. for an Instagram video. The explosion was huge. They had no permits, no safety protocols. They just wanted to watch something go boom.
So he gets arrested on a federal warrant for building a bomb on federal land. He must have faced serious prison time for that.
You would think so. But no. He managed to get a plea deal.
To what?
He pleaded no contest to a much, much lesser misdemeanor charge of negligently failing to extinguish a fire in the open. Basically, a fancy charge for littering and not being careful with a campfire.
And the punishment for blowing up a truck with an improvised explosive device.
He had to pay a fine of about $17,000.
$17,000.
It's amazing what a team of expensive lawyers can do. But it really shows you the trajectory, the constant need for escalation. The poker wasn't enough. The parties weren't enough. Now he needed actual explosions to feel anything.
And when you've blown up everything you can in Nevada, where do you go for your next adrenaline hit? Apparently, you go and get yourself involved in an active war zone.
Oh, it brings us to Section 4, the Armenian connection. This is where the story suddenly goes from Hollywood Hills to international geopolitics.
So to set this up, Dan's family heritage is Armenian.
Yes, on his father's side. The Bilzerian name has deep roots in Armenia. And in 2018, Dan, his brother Adam, and his father Paul all flew to Armenia together.
And this is a big deal over there.
It was a massive media event. They were all there to formally take their oaths and receive Armenian citizenship. They even technically registered to join the Armenian Armed Forces.
Which, you know, on the surface sounds like a pretty cool thing to do. Reconnecting with your roots, showing support for your ancestral homeland.
It absolutely could have been. But this is Dan Bilzerian we're talking about, so he couldn't just leave it at that. He had to turn it into an action movie. He decided to travel to the Republic of Artsakh.
Which is better known to most people as Nagorno-Karabakh.
Right.
And for anyone who doesn't follow geopolitics in that region, can you explain why just going there is a hugely provocative act?
It is a massive deal. Nagorno-Karabakh is one of the most intensely disputed territories on the planet. For decades, it was a source of conflict and bloody wars between Armenia and Azerbaijan.
It's internationally recognized as part of Azerbaijan, but it was historically populated and controlled by ethnic Armenians.
Exactly. It's a geopolitical flashpoint. You don't just show up there as a tourist with a camera crew.
Yeah.
It's seen as taking a side in a very real, very violent conflict.
But Dan went.
He went. And he didn't go to visit a church or a historical monument. He went to a military shooting range near the front lines of the conflict, and he started firing off heavy weaponry.
Of course he did. He posted videos of himself firing a grenade launcher.
In a contested war zone. As you can imagine, the government of Azerbaijan was absolutely furious.
I bet.
They sent a formal note of protest to the U.S. State Department. A court in the capital, Baku, issued an official arrest warrant for Dan Bilzerian. They put him on an international wanted list and notified Interpol.
So the king of Instagram became, for all intents and purposes, an international fugitive.
In the eyes of at least one country, yes. Now, to be fair to him, he did put his money where his mouth was, to some extent. During the 2020 war over the territory, he and his family donated $250,000 to the Armenia Fund.
So there does seem to be a genuine connection there.
There is. He spoke out very strongly against the attacks on Armenians. But even his philanthropy is filtered through this lens of conflict and weaponry. It's like he can't engage with the world in any other way.
Everything has to be an action movie. But recently, the script for that movie has changed dramatically, and the new genre feels less like an action thriller and more like a political horror film.
And that's where we have to go next. Section 5, The Pivot, the deep dive into politics, conspiracies, and extremism. This is the part of the story that is genuinely alarming people right now.
It's definitely the most significant and shocking transformation in his public persona.
Without a doubt.
It all started, I guess, innocently enough, back in 2015. He announced he was running for president of the United States.
Which was clearly a publicity stunt. It was about selling more T-shirts and getting his name out there.
Right. But then, a few months later, in December 2015, he dropped out of his fake race and endorsed Donald Trump. And his reasoning at the time was very on brand for him.
What did she say?
He said he liked that Trump was raw and unfiltered, and that he was very pro-gun. It fit perfectly with his whole anti-PC alpha male persona.
Okay, so that makes sense, in a way.
But if you fast forward from that moment in 2015 to where we are today in 2024, we have left the realm of mainstream politics far, far behind.
We're in a completely different universe now, and the major catalyst for this shift seems to have been the Israel-Hamas war that began in late 2023.
And we need to be very clear here. Dan didn't just adopt a pro-Palestinian political stance, which is a position many people around the world hold. He went much, much further than that.
He went all the way into full-throated public support for Hamas.
Yeah, I have the direct quotes here from his social media and interviews. He referred to Hamas as a resistance organization, and he called Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in Gaza, and the man who orchestrated the October 7th attacks, a hero.
I mean, look, whatever your personal politics are on that conflict, calling the architect of a massacre that killed over 1,000 civilians a hero that's an exceptionally extreme position to take. It's designed to be inflammatory.
And then he went on Piers Morgan's show, and that interview was it was a complete unmasking.
I watched the entire interview. It was one of the most disturbing things I've seen in a long time.
He just launched into this torrent of pure anti-Semitism, and I don't use that word lightly. He wasn't just criticizing the actions of the Israeli government, he was attacking Jewish people and Judaism as a whole.
He was just reciting a laundry list of the oldest, most hateful anti-Semitic conspiracy theories imaginable. He claimed that the religion of Judaism itself promotes supremacy and rape. He blamed the Jews for the 9/11 attacks.
He blamed them for the JFK assassination, for the Iraq War, for the Holodomor famine in Ukraine in the 1930s.
It's the grand unified theory of anti-Semitic paranoia. The idea that every single bad thing that has ever happened in world history was secretly orchestrated by a cabal of Jewish people.
And then he moved into outright Holocaust denial.
This was the point in the interview that I think left even Piers Morgan speechless.
He said on camera that he would bet his entire net worth that fewer than 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust. He then claimed that Jewish people invented genocide.
He also started spouting historical revisionism, claiming that Nazi Germany was flourishing economically after they removed all the Jews from the banking system. This is word-for-word textbook neo-Nazi rhetoric. There's no other way to describe it.
So the big question is, why? Why does a guy who seemingly has everything, the money, the fame, the lifestyle he always wanted, why does he go down this dark, hateful rabbit hole? Is he just bored? Is he trying to shock people to stay relevant?
I think it's probably a combination of several things. One is definitely the relevance factor.
Yeah.
The whole bikinis and private jets act has a shelf life. It gets old. The engagement numbers on his social media were dropping.
And nothing gets engagement like outrage.
Exactly. When you say something that shocking and hateful, it creates a firestorm. The algorithm loves it. He's a creature of attention, and this is the ultimate attention-seeking behavior.
So you think it's mostly a grift? He doesn't really believe this stuff.
I think he probably does now. That's the other part of it.
Sure.
When you immerse yourself in these online echo chambers, when you surround yourself with people who tell you you're a genius and you spend all day consuming red pill conspiracy content, you can absolutely radicalize yourself.
He sees himself as a brave truth teller.
In his mind, he's Neo from the Matrix. He's waking people up. But in reality, he's just become a vessel for regurgitating old, discredited disinformation and hatred.
It's just such a bizarre and dark final chapter for his persona. It's like he spent his whole life trying to be Tony Stark, the playboy billionaire, and when that didn't quite work out, he decided to become a full-blown supervillain instead.
It really is a cautionary tale about the professional contrarian mindset. His entire brand was built on doing the opposite of what you're supposed to do. Society says, don't gamble, I'll gamble. Society says, treat people with respect, I won't.
Society says, don't engage in anti-Semitic hate speech.
Oh, watch me. Like oppositional defiance disorder that has been monetized into a career.
And speaking of careers, we have to quickly touch on his other great ambition, because before he was a political extremist, he was desperate to become a real Hollywood actor.
Section 6. The action star illusion.
He's had a few tiny roles over the years, little cameos in movies like Olympus Has Fallen and The Equalizer. But there is one story from his acting career that perfectly encapsulates his entire life: the Lone Survivor lawsuit.
Oh, this is the ultimate pay-to-play story. It's incredible.
So Lone Survivor is the big Mark Wahlberg movie about Navy SEALs in Afghanistan. Dan, a failed SEAL trainee himself, desperately wants to be in this movie, so what does he do?
He can't get a role through a normal audition, so he finds another way in. He agrees to invest $1 million of his own money into the film's production budget.
But there were strings attached.
There were. He had a contract drawn up. And that contract explicitly stated that in exchange for his $1 million investment, the filmmakers had to guarantee him at least 8 minutes of screen time and at least 80 words of dialogue.
He literally bought the role. He paid for his screen time by the minute.
That's exactly what he did. He bought himself a part playing a Navy SEAL. But here's the best part. The director of the movie, Peter Berg, apparently thought he was a terrible actor. So when it came time to edit the final film, he just cut almost all of his scenes out.
How much was actually left in the movie?
Less than 1 minute of screen time and one single line of dialogue.
One line. For $1 million, that has to be the most expensive line of dialogue in the history of cinema.
I think it might be. And what was Dan's reaction? Did he just laugh it off as a bad investment? No, he sued the producers of the movie.
Of course he did. For how much?
He sued them for $1.2 million. His original $1 million back, plus a 20% penalty for breach of contract.
Did he win?
He eventually dropped the lawsuit. He claimed it was because the movie ended up being so successful that his small percentage of the profits actually made him $1.5 million anyway, so he came out ahead.
But the money isn't the point. The point is that his entire approach to life is transactional. He couldn't earn the role with talent, so he tried to buy it. And even when he bought it, the creative people involved were like, yeah, no, you're still not good enough. You're getting cut.
It's the theme that runs through everything. He believes that fame, respect, credibility, movie roles, they're all just commodities that can be purchased if you have enough cash. But some things, like actual talent, just can't be bought.
He also wrote a book, didn't he? The Setup.
He did. I've read parts of it.
Yeah.
It's exactly what you would expect it to be. Just more stories of his conquests, more myth-making.
And there was even a T-Pain song about him.
Dan Bilzerian. For a brief moment in 2016, he achieved total cultural saturation. He got the fame he so desperately craved. You can't deny that.
No, you can't. If you stop the average guy on the street between the ages 25 and 35 and ask who Dan Bilzerian is, they'll know that name.
But at what cost? We've taken this deep dive today. We've looked at the money, and it's built on a foundation of trust funds and questionable dealings. We looked at the business, and is a spectacular failure that burned through millions of investor dollars.
We looked at the lifestyle, and it literally gave him 2 heart attacks and led to a string of lawsuits from people he hurt.
And we looked at his current worldview, and it's a toxic sewer of hatred and conspiracy theories. When you step back and look at the whole picture, it's not an aspirational story. It's a tragedy.
It's a tragedy wrapped in a veneer of gold leaf and bikinis. It feels like a story about the absolute spiritual emptiness of modern excess. He spent 15 years meticulously building this giant monument to himself, and it turns out the entire foundation is completely rotten.
So as we wrap this up, what's the big takeaway from all this?
I think Dan Bilzerian is a warning sign. He's a cautionary tale. He is what happens when a person has access to virtually unlimited resources, but has no internal moral compass.
He just chased every possible dopamine hit he could find. The money, the sex, the fame, the violence, the explosions. And when all of those stopped giving him a rush, he turned to the only thing that was left. Pure, unadulterated rage.
It also makes you look inward a bit, doesn't it, at the culture that built him. I mean, we all clicked on the articles, we looked at the photos, we fed the beast.
That's the really uncomfortable part of this whole story. For a while there, society celebrated the king of Instagram. A part of us was fascinated by that fantasy of total freedom. But we weren't really looking at the collateral damage. We weren't looking at the woman with the broken foot or the investors who lost their shirts.
So I guess this is the question I want to leave everyone with today. In our current internet culture, a culture that rewards shock value over substance and engagement over truth, is Dan Bilzerian really an outlier? Or is he the inevitable final boss of the system that we've all helped to create?
Did he break the system? Or is he just the purest expression of what the system was designed to produce?
That's a pretty terrifying thought.
It really is.
But it's why we do these deep dives. To try and look past the filters and the carefully constructed myths.
Stay curious out there. And always, always check the footnotes.
Always check the footnotes. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you for the next one.